The following content may contain visuals that are disturbing, sensitive in nature. Viewer discretion is advised. This material is intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all viewers. Please exercise caution while watching, and if you find such content distressing, we recommend discontinuing viewing. This disclaimer is provided to ensure awareness and to prioritize viewer well-being.
The war between Israel and Hamas has now entered its 56th day. Let's get you the latest updates straight from the war front. Israel has accused Hamas of violating the expired truce, leading to the resumption of combat in Gaza. 8 more Israeli hostages have been freed from Gaza as of Thursday. Israeli authorities say they released 30 Palestinian prisoners in return. U.S. Secretary of State has met both Israeli and Palestinian leaders. Meanwhile, Houthi rebels are set to resume military operations against Israel if the war continues. More than 14,800 people, including more than 6,000 children, have been killed in the war so far. Truce between Israel and Hamas expired, with neither side announcing a deal to extend it. An hour before the truce was scheduled to end, Israel intercepted a rocket fired from Gaza. On the other side, Hamas-affiliated media reported sounds of explosions and gunfire in the north of the Palestinian enclave. The Israeli military stated that further siren warning of rocket attacks sounded again in Israeli areas near Gaza just minutes before the deadline for the truce were to expire. Heavy Israeli firing has been reported across Gaza and Rafah near the border with Egypt. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met Israel's President Isaac Herzog on Thursday to discuss the ongoing truce between Israel and Hamas, among other developments. Blinken said that a temporary truce between Israel and Hamas had produced results and that the U.S. hoped that it would continue. Blinken said that Washington was focused on helping to secure freedom for hostages taken to Gaza during the 7th October attacks. Herzog, Israel's president, informed Blinken that about 150 hostages continue to remain in Gaza. Their meeting in Tel Aviv took place on a morning when 2 Palestinian attackers opened fire at a bus stop during rush hour at the entrance to Jerusalem, killing at least 3 people and wounding 8 others. Both Antony Blinken and Isaac Herzog condemned the attack.
Well, again, unfortunately, as we are meeting now, there are casualties in a serious terror attack in the entrance to Jerusalem, our capital. 2 terrorists have attacked innocent civilians waiting to be picked up to go on their day's work. And we have casualties, we have loss of life, and I would like to express my heartfelt condolences to the families and of course to pray for the swift recovery of the wounded. This is another example of the situation we're in, the endless war that we are fighting against terror organizations, especially Hamas, in these very complicated and challenging times. I thank you for coming here. As always, you've been expressing the support of the United States, the President, administration, and I must say on behalf of the American people at large, so I thank you very much. We are working and praying and demanding the immediate release of all the hostages, and I thank the United States of America for the immense work it is devoting to the release of the hostages. There are still around 150 hostages who are there in Hamas hands in Gaza.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. This is my fourth visit to Israel since October 7th. And as you said, we're reminded yet again by the events in Jerusalem today of the threat from terrorism that Israel and Israelis face every single day. And like you, my heart goes out to the victims of this attack. I believe one person lost life, maybe as many as 3. We're thinking of them, we're thinking of their families, their loved ones, and we mourn their loss just as we mourn the loss of any innocent life. From day one, we have been focused relentlessly on trying to secure the release of hostages from Gaza and from Hamas. And we have seen over the last week the very positive development of hostages coming home, being reunited with their families, and that should continue today.
Meanwhile, Antony Blinken also met Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Thursday in Jerusalem. The U.S. Secretary of State visited Jerusalem for the 3rd time since the war began.
Secretary and I had an opportunity to begin the discussion, and there are many issues that we want to talk about. So I want to express our appreciation for your support from the beginning, the President's, your personal, your delegation, and the war aims of eliminating Hamas and releasing, securing the release of our hostages. You've been very, very helpful. We appreciate it deeply. We'd like to talk to you about the next phase. So that's a summary of what we'd like to talk about and began talking about.
Earlier on Thursday, a total of 8 Israeli hostages were released by Hamas as part of the temporary ceasefire deal. Israel, on its part, freed 30 Palestinian prisoners in the early hours of Friday under the Truce deal. In return, since the Truce agreement on 24th November, 110 hostages have been released, including 80 Israelis. The majority of the 30 non-Israeli hostages released were from Thailand, and they were freed under a separate agreement. Meanwhile, Israel has released 240 Palestinian prisoners in exchange. The United Nations Commission investigating war crimes in the Israel-Hamas conflict will focus on sexual violence by Hamas during the October 7th attacks on Israel. Navi Pillay, the Commission's chair, plans to launch an appeal for evidence and will pass it on to the International Criminal Court. Israel's lack of cooperation poses a challenge, with the country citing an alleged anti-Israel bias. Despite that, Pillay has collaborated with the International Criminal Court's prosecutors and condemned Israel's response to the October 7th attacks by Hamas. The Commission also prioritizes investigating the killing of reporters during the conflict, including Reuters journalist Issam Abdallah.
With the deputy prosecutor's emphasis on how seriously she wishes to investigate the incidents of sexual violence, the complaints coming from Israel. Well, self-defense doesn't apply here because Gaza is not a state. I agree, it's absolutely shocking the numbers of people that have been killed and continue to face the risk of starvation, killings, and so on, because the bombings and attacks have not stopped.
Israeli officials possessed Hamas's detailed plan for the October 7th terrorist attacks over a year in advance, known as the Jericho Wall document. The New York Times reviewed the document and listed out reasons that led to Israel's failure in recognizing the October 7th attacks and its possibility. The 40-page blueprint outlined a devastating invasion, but it was dismissed as aspirational and too challenging for Hamas to execute. The plan's shocking precision including rocket attacks, drone attacks, and gunmen entering Israel in various ways, unfolded as described in the document. Hamas followed the document like a compass and executed the plan without any obstacle. The document raised questions about Hamas's intelligence sources and potential leaks within the Israeli security establishment as well. On the 6th of July 2023, Unit 8200 analysts alerted intelligence experts in Israel that Hamas commandos are conducting training exercises simulating actions outlined in the Jericho Wall plan. The drill included shooting down Israeli aircraft, seizing a kibbutz, and taking control of a military training base, mirroring the planned attack. The analyst emphasized that Hamas was actively developing the capability to execute the Jericho Wall assault. Despite these warnings, a deeply ingrained belief that Hamas lacked the capability to attack led to a significant intelligence failure on the part of Israel. The audacity of the plan made it easy to underestimate, resulting in one of Israel's worst miscalculations in its history. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Dubai today, where he is scheduled to participate in the COP28 climate summit. In addition to addressing COP28, Prime Minister Modi will also engage in 3 high-level side events, 2 of them co-hosted by India. PM Modi was welcomed by an enthusiastic set of Indians in Dubai as he landed. Narendra Modi as he touched down in Dubai. Indians across the board performing cultural dances as well as waiting in line to shake hands. The enthusiasm and the excitement there palpable, because bear in mind PM Modi is in Dubai for first the COP28 Climate Action Summit, apart from which he has other important engagements as well lined up. The first event, co-hosted by India and the UAE, focuses on the Green Credit Program initiated by the Ministry of Environment of India in the month of October this year. Another side event, co-hosted by India and Sweden, will mark the launch of Lead IT 2.0, a leadership group for energy transition. This collaborative effort, initiated in the year 2019, aims to accelerate the industry transition to net zero emissions by fostering collaboration between public and private sectors. PM Modi will also participate in a high-level event titled Transforming Climate Finance. The COP28 Climate Summit emphasizes the need for nations to swiftly reduce emissions and phase out fossil fuels. PM Modi is expected to return to India later on Friday evening, as stated by Foreign Secretary of India Vinay Quatra. during the briefing that was held on Thursday. Keeping it with the COP28 climate summit in Dubai, where nearly 200 nations converge, each with its own unique agenda. Take a look at the key players at the COP28 summit and their respective objectives.
Each country has its own agenda for the nearly 200 nations gathering at COP28 in Dubai. And finding consensus is a challenge, as UN climate negotiations need unanimous support to pass. Here are some of the climate summit's main players and what they're looking for. China, the world leader in both clean and dirty energy. It's responsible for 30% of annual global emissions, making it the world's biggest greenhouse gas emitter. But it also has more renewable energy capacity than anywhere else. China has been feeling the impacts of climate change through heat waves, floods, and extreme drought. Despite having the world's second largest economy after the US, it sees itself as a developing nation in climate talks and argues wealthy, developed nations like the US should move first and fastest in policy and finance. It's part of the bloc of basic countries alongside South Africa, Brazil, and India, who argue the same. The United States is the world's second largest emitter. It comes to COP28 a year into rolling out a $369 billion plus subsidy package for electric vehicles and other green products. Its Inflation Reduction Act is expected to triple the country's clean energy capacity by 2030. But U.S. delegates will face pressure at COP28 after Washington pledged no new climate cash to the United Nations this year. It supports a COP28 deal to phase out CO2-emitting fossil fuel use, despite being the world's biggest oil and gas producer. The 27-country European Union is among the most ambitious. The bloc, along with the U.S., is pushing to triple renewable capacity. It also aims to end new coal-fueled power plants, phase out fossil fuels, and power electricity grids with renewable sources in the 2030s. African countries are pushing for climate finance to speed up green energy projects. But not everyone's on the same page. Some, like Kenya, Ethiopia, and Senegal, have backed calls for phasing out fossil fuel production. Others, like Mozambique, want to develop their reserve of gas to capitalize off European gas demands. But they do agree that any deal on phasing out fossil fuels must allow poor nations to develop reserves in the short term to alleviate energy poverty.
Hearing no objections, it is so decided.
The UN Climate Summit clinched an early victory on Thursday, with delegates adopting a new fund to help vulnerable nations cope with the cost of climate-driven disasters. The deal was adopted following the COP28 opening ceremony in Dubai and already follows many months of negotiations. But some groups were cautious, noting there were still unresolved issues, including how the fund would be financed in the future. The United Arab Emirates will contribute $100 million to the pot, along with other countries contributing a total of just over $300 million. Germany pledged $100 million and the United States $17.5 million, with hopes the amount would build to a substantial sum. The early breakthrough on the damage fund, which poorer nations have demanded for years, could help grease the wheels for further compromises. Earlier in the day, COP28 President Sultan Al Jaber, who is also the CEO of the UAE's national oil company, opened the summit urging countries and fossil fuel companies to work together to meet global climate goals. Al Jaber aimed to strike a conciliatory tone following months of criticism over his appointment as the head of COP28.
Let history reflect the fact that this is the presidency that made a bold choice to proactively engage with oil and gas companies. We had many hard discussions. Let me tell you, that wasn't easy. But today, many of these companies are committing to zero methane emissions by 2030 for the first time. And now, many national oil companies have adopted net zero 2050 targets for the first time. And I'm grateful that they have stepped up to join this game-changing journey. But I must say, it is not enough. And I know that they can do much more.
Over the next 2 weeks, governments will also debate whether to agree, for the first time, to phase out the use of CO2-emitting coal, oil and gas globally, the main source of emissions. Also on the agenda is what's known as the global stocktake. This is when countries assess their progress in meeting global climate goals. The main one being the Paris Agreement goal of limiting global warming to well below 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit or 2 degrees Celsius.
And with that, it's a wrap here from my side. Thank you so much for watching. This is Krishna Kumar signing off. Keep it with News 9.
They picked my husband. He was tortured there for 2 years. He was enforced disappeared. We had no idea where he is. Within 15 minutes, we got the information that the whole area is